Welcome to AI Snacks with Romy and Robin, AI Literacy Podcast, and your bite-sized guide to big ideas shaping AI foundational technologies and applications and interesting AI and robotic implementations. And today we are going grocery shopping. And just think how we do it usually. So we write some lists on some pieces of paper. Sometimes we lose those. And then we enter a store and sometimes we get distracted. And what is the result? We overspend or we forget those key ingredients needed to bake this favorite cake for our daughter's birthday. So can we AI our way out of a grocery shopping problem? And is it a worthwhile application to build an AI around it? And there's something particular I learned just today. 1/3 of all the food produced gets lost and wasted. And I can really feel this is a massive problem. We might feed the planet just with this food. And I have today a wonderful founder with me in the studio, and this is Andy Ellwood. And he has created a company he will tell us about, but this is not his very first business. Andy is a serial entrepreneur. He's deeply rooted in the American entrepreneurial community. He worked in some fabulous companies like Waze, and he is a mentor to countless founders and entrepreneurs. So, Andy, I'm so thrilled. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
So, just to start, could you just briefly introduce yourself and talk about your journey and tell us about your philosophy? How do you create businesses and why did you pay attention to this particular problem of grocery shopping?
Yeah, no. So I think that the common thread through most of my career is curiosity, is asking one more question and maybe just one more after that. And that started from a pretty early age. I was always kind of asking like, what's possible? And, I grew up in Texas and, was the oldest of 4 kids. I was always kind of, my parents were maybe paying attention to my younger siblings and I was off trying something new. And that led me to entrepreneurship. I started my first company when I was 12.
Wow.
Mowing lawns and landscaping, people's gardens, just to make a little bit of extra money. And I realized that, it was a fun way to keep score. Like, could I do more next week than I did this week? And there was, kind of this little bit of competitiveness in me. And that led me into studying finance in college and then getting into sales as my first jobs, after university. But then realizing that the curiosity around like, well, what else could we sell? Like not just widgets, not just products, but like, could we sell ideas? That kind of led me into the founder life and got me into my first startups and, was working on teams that, for companies that ended up being acquired by Facebook. I was on a team that you mentioned, Waze, that was acquired by Google. I became a founder and that company was acquired. And so it's kind of just been, kind of a ball of experiences that have led me to where I am today.
It's kind of interesting. And I will be asking you about Waze because so one piece of the Waze model was actually this network of users. And that actually optimized the experience on the application for those who might have amnesia. So Waze is a navigation application which really optimized how we kind of, were driving around Silicon Valley or other nice places, avoiding traffic jams, construction sites, etc. And indeed, so this power of users, whether you are still utilizing it in your current technology or not, so that would be one of my questions. Grocery shopping, why? I mean, there's so many problems in the world to be curious about.
Yeah. So being the oldest of 4, I grew up in a family that had enough, but in hindsight, it was just enough, right?
Yeah.
Like if I go back and I think about, part of the reason that I decided to go build my lawn mowing business was because, my allowance wasn't big enough, right? And my parents were as generous as they could be, but there was, with 4 kids, like we, at the end of the month when we were waiting for dad's next paycheck, there wasn't a whole lot in the pantry or in the refrigerator. And so groceries were always something that we were thinking a lot about. But then also I love to cook. I'm an amateur chef. I host a dinner series for founders and friends here in New York City. And so I'm always buying groceries and thinking about, all right, which store do I go to for the different ingredients, but that's always kind of been a big part of my life. And a friend of mine had become a new dad and was asking the question, like, is that actually how much these things cost? Like, I know it's on my shopping list, but how much does it actually cost to buy those 14 things? And, we thought to ourselves, well, there's Expedia for travel. There's Zillow for homes. There's Auto Trader for cars. There's GoodRx for prescriptions. There's Gas Buddy for some fuel prices. There's even, Waze for traffic. But what is my source of truth for how much my groceries should cost this week? Yeah. What if I say, here's what I want to buy, who's going to tell me what all of my options are? And not just at one store, across all of my stores. Like if I'm going to go buy a flight, I'm going to check Expedia and I'm going to see, okay, American Airlines is this and British Airways is this and Lufthansa is this and Delta is this. And I'm going to pick the best one for me based on the route, based on the timing, and based on the price. But for my groceries, I just walk into a store close by and hope that they carry all of my products and hope they charge me a fair price. And in 2026, that seems like a silly way to do our grocery shopping. We're spending tens of thousands of dollars a year on food to feed our families, and we do it blindly right now. And so that was just kind of the question that going back to curiosity, I asked the question, wait, why is that?
Yeah. It just came across my mind. 25 years ago, I worked at McKinsey, and I was in financial services and automotive practice, not in fast-moving consumer good practice. And someone working in this fast-moving consumer practice asked me a question, Anastassia, what in your eyes is the most expensive liquid in the world? And I was I was thinking, well, maybe liquid gold. So depending on what cycle we are in an economy, maybe it's oil. And actually it turned out to be ink for the printer cartridges.
Mm-hmm.
And especially HP turned out not to be a company just manufacturing this hardware, but it was an ink company. And if you positioned 1 milliliter of this printing ink, it was more in terms of money than Chanel No. 5 as a perfume or some vintage Bourgogne wine or Bordeaux or champagne.
Nice.
Or even liquid gold. So actually, economists have a name for this phenomenon. So they're talking about pricing elasticity, and countless industries make their ends meet because of this phenomenon. So now you're crawling your way into the food market.
Yeah.
Obviously, food will cost very different things depending on where the store is, what is the clientele, and actually the country. For example, I sit in Europe and we have this Aldi and Lidl. So their value proposition is we are very stable in terms of just being cheap, not necessarily bad, but just cheap. And this is our value proposition to the customers. So how do you think about this issue of price elasticity in food when you reside in New York, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world?
Yeah. Well, I think that when we think about what we're building with Stretch, that's the name of the company. We're thinking about how everybody shops, and everybody has what we call it pricing proximity preference. So how far will you go to save how much money? Right. So in New York, it might be we walk most of the time here. So I'll walk 10 blocks, right? But growing up in Texas, I might drive 10 miles, right? And different people based on where they are, urban, suburban, near urban, rural, right? No matter where you are in the world, there's, you're used to a certain amount of distance that you have to cover in order to get the things that you need. And so what we're trying to do with Stretch is when you give us your shopping list this week, we show you all the stores that are in your area, that are on the platform, that carry all the items on your list or similar products, because we have to allow for store brands or national brands or regional brands. So we do equivalency matching. That's one of the things we're using AI for. And we say, here's what your list looks like at this store. Here's what it looks like at this store. Here's what it looks like at this store. And we tell you the total price for each of those stores. And then you can choose. You can say, hey, you know what? That store's closest to me and it's $5 more than the other store. Driving 2 miles, I don't know if I'm going to do that to save $5. But there's another store that is, 6 miles away, but you save $50 on a $200 shopping list. I might actually drive a little bit further to get that because the kids are at a birthday party and I have a little bit of extra time. And that's really what I mean by trade-offs, right? So, if it's buying a flight, you might be going to a different airport. You might be flying first thing in the morning as opposed to, a little bit later in the day. All of those things factor into how much the plane ticket's going to cost. Same thing with food. Is it the store that's closest to you? Is it the name brand of the items that you want? Or are you willing to drive a little bit further and maybe go for some off-brand items like what Aldi or Lidl or what they offer? And Aldi and Lidl, they're moving very quickly into the US. And I know a lot of people that are very excited, to see more of them popping up.
Yeah. I'm just, thinking about the data sourcing problem of what you try to build. And I don't think this is kind of an easy exercise. It's not a walk in the Central Park. So essentially, you require sources telling you the actual price. And this is a dynamic engine. You can't just be frozen in space. You need somehow people providing you with this information. So opening up their pricing engine, which is an issue of trust, I guess. And what kind of benefits do they have if they are kind of, open up to you? Then, of course, you need residential customers who would sign up and just use you. So how do you source data in your company?
Yeah, so there's a lot more data available now publicly than there used to be. But the really big challenge is the normalization that we do on our side. So finding the data is easier than it used to be. Accessing the data is easier than it used to be. But normalizing it, if you think about how many different grocery stores there are, and you think about all the different ways that they structured their data to describe the same box of cereal, is very different than the way that every other store talks about their, and it's all naming conventions that have been around for a long time, back to, Excel files or back to, reams of printed out paper, right? Just because it's digitized doesn't mean it was cleaned up. And so every retailer has a very different taxonomy around the way that they name something as simple as a box of cereal. We have to understand what that is for that retailer. And then we have to match it to what another retailer says on the other side. And so that's where the normalization and the equivalencies are created, so that when a shopper gives me their shopping list and they write cereal, it's a pretty simple response as far as they're concerned. But we're doing a lot of work on the back end to make it look that simple.
And I guess that just item recognition is an issue as well, because there are so many similar items, right? So
Yeah.
how do you deal with this problem?
Yeah, the more that our shoppers use the Stretch Smart Grocery Shopping List, the more we understand their preferences.
Right.
So in the same way that if my wife sends me to the grocery store and she says, get cheese, I know that she means provolone slices of provolone cheese that are going to go on sandwiches. But she's not going to write provolone sliced cheese. She's just going to write cheese. Same thing. Stretch gets to know you and your preferences and knows your consideration set. So, if I write cereal, it might be Raisin Bran, Special K, or Nut Cheerios, right? But it's one of those three, right? And when I get to the store, I may pick which one makes the most sense. I may price all three of them out. But that, just the way that you would get to know somebody and what their preferences are, that's the way that Stretch works to get to know your preferences and say, here's all the things that you have ever shopped for in the past. We can track those prices at local stores and make sure that we find the best deal, the discounts and loyalty programs, because there's so many different ways that stores price things as well. So it's not just product selection, it's also pricing that they have on a weekly basis. And so it changes all the time. And I think that, as a founder, that's the thing that made this really exciting is it seems like this should have been solved by now, but it's actually a really, really challenging data problem to do it for the shopper, right? Every store has done it for their store and done it for just the shoppers at their store. But no one's ever done it for shoppers at large across all stores. And that's what we're doing.
I'm just wondering, is it kind of, a similar problem to those, let's say, nutrition apps, which have the section My Food, and then you actually type in this and that brand and those calories. But I guess it's not about calories, it's about the price. So do you have this kind of My Corner, My Food Corner in your app? So I'm not based in the US. I would have tried you out before the interview if I could.
Yeah. So your preferences are made visible to you, so you can understand. You can tell us more. We're working on lots of different ways to be able to track that information. We can imagine a future where you take a photo of your refrigerator, you take a photo of your pantry, and just we can kind of using computer vision understand like what's there. and what what you've purchased, what you like, what you buy most frequently, and just get to know you, right? There's a lot of different products, but it is a known universe of products. And so, there's the top 1,000 products that people, put on their shopping list that we're getting to know. And then we look at your shopping list and the frequency with which you purchase. And, we think about it like a scout that goes out and checks all the prices at the stores for you and then comes back and hands you the answers to the test. That's kind of what we want the relationship between the shopper and Stretch to be.
Frankly, so just, I'm seeing in front of my mental eyes multiple business models for you. So, of course, there's like the obvious, you go to the store, maybe you charge the store, maybe there's a subscription, but just when your information is that vast and that deep, you can even work with food companies on building new products, new packaging, new pricing mechanisms, because I mean, this is actually the intellect, the brain of a company. So how do you think about those, I would call them B2C to B type of business models?
Yeah. The really exciting part about what we're building is that if, I tell the team all the time, we just have to have blinders on. Because if we just serve the shopper, right, we just build the right thing for, for the busy mom who doesn't have time and doesn't have extra money and just needs a little bit of relief, a little bit of help in this week's grocery trip, right? Because everybody has to buy groceries,
Yeah.
but it just feels overwhelming so much of the time that if we can just give her a little bit of relief, let her know that she's not alone. If we can give the husband who, gets handed the grocery list, and says, yeah, after you pick up the kids from soccer practice, go get these groceries, right? Like, he's like, I don't remember which brand we like. It's probably this one, but maybe it's this one. And then he gets home and it's wrong. And then he has to go back to the store, right? If we can give him a little bit of a break, those are the things that we get really excited about building. And if we do that, to your point, we have a really, really incredible data set that nobody else in the world has. We know what people are intending to purchase, right? Which is, your shopping list, you make that, 24 to 48 hours before you go to the store, right? So, there's all the intent captured before the purchase. We know what you actually purchased, right? So we can say, what did you want to buy? What did you actually buy? What's different there? And that's, really, really valuable information for the retailers and for brands. But then to your point, what can we start to learn about new product development? What can we start to learn about preferences and, shifting towards, one type of trend or another? All that information is buried in the data that we call it data exhaust, right?
Yeah.
It's not the point, right? It's not why we built the engine, but it's a very valuable resource that we've created as a result.
And I guess you may even observe some very important economic trends like inflation while just looking into your database, right?
Yeah.
What are the milk prices? What are the meat prices, etc.?
Absolutely.
I wonder because we don't have it in Europe, but to my knowledge, Amazon tried point of sales in the United States, including I think in New York, and to my knowledge, it did not go well. So they were kind of, aspiring a certain setup, and this robotic checkout did not work out well for them. So I'm kind of, smiling whenever I hear about overpowerful AI. It's so much human intervention that it becomes increasingly not competitive. How do you think about online spaces versus what you are trying to build? And when you are successful one day, could you provide a kind of an infrastructure for those gigantic online sellers to do their job better on point of sales?
Yeah. If you think about what the power that shoppers are leaving on the table by not using a smart grocery list, right? You have collective bargaining opportunities. If there's 1,000 people in your neighborhood all using Stretch, and you say, hey, as a community, we want to buy this much toilet paper, and we want to buy this many bananas, and we want to buy this much like what could that look like? Like those are things that I think about like way down the line when we start to think about like the power that the shoppers will have if they can come together and be able to actually like have a seat at the table with retailers. But on the online front, grocery was the last industry that e-commerce really affected, right? Because it's complicated and most purchases are multiple items, right? And so how do you make sure that all of those items are available for that shopping trip? So, like books came online in the 90s, right? Electronics came online in the early 2000s. grocery really didn't come online until 2015, 2016, right? And it was hard. But if you think about what's happening with agentic commerce is going to be really good for groceries. And this is the opportunity that I think online grocery stores have, is if they work with us and the agents that we might build on behalf of the shopper, we'll be able to send their agent the order, and they'll be able to negotiate and have the best experience both for the store and for the shopper. And I think that that's what the really big upside is where there's a shopper side agent that communicates with Amazon's agent or communicates with Walmart.com's agent, and be able to say, hey, this is the family that we're shopping for today. Here's what they want, and here's what their budget is. What can you do for us? And that type of optimization, I think, is going to be a really, really exciting thing to watch in the next 5 years.
I'm wondering now, so I remember my days at T-Mobile International and Deutsche Telekom, and so I was part of what I was running was T Ventures, which is the captive venture capital fund. And I remember those models when people should be attracted to stores because they received like a coupon. So the proximity to the store was tracked due to mobile technology, and then they were invited. So I don't think that those models became vastly successful at the end. And piece of it was just a huge cost per customer to acquire. How do you get to your end users, to consumers? And if you can reveal, so what approximation, how much does it cost to acquire such a customer?
Yeah.
Maybe it's depending on geography as well. I don't know.
Yeah. Right now, most of our customers find us through social media, or they find us through referrals from a friend. And the challenge that's happening everywhere, but in the United States, specifically where we're domiciled, grocery inflation is over 30% since the pandemic.
My God. Okay.
And so it is a real problem,
Yeah.
and everybody's looking for a solution. And so for us to be able to say, like, prices are up 30% over the past 5 years, here's a way for you to like find some relief, find some help, is really a very powerful message that moves pretty quickly through groups of friends and from families. And so, we're growing very quickly because of that. And so we're working on all the growth models, and we're trying to figure out all the ways to make it go even faster, because we want to help more people.
Yeah.
But we're very fortunate that we have a lot of people that are really excited about what we're doing, and they're telling their friends, and that's been very good for us so far this year.
No, congratulations. It's like a snowball, right? Rolling down the mountain. I wonder, is it difficult to kind of, penetrate those WhatsApp groups, like interest groups, or those mom groups or yoga classes where you have all those moms who are grocery shopping?
Yeah, that is where we've seen a lot of activity.
Yeah.
And I think that in the same way that they joke that hipsters were listening to bands that you've never heard of, like grocery shoppers are talking about savings in the same way, right? They're hey, you'll never guess what, I found a way to save $30 this week. Yeah. Oh my gosh, let me check it out too, right? And that mechanic of we're doing it together, right? Because I think that's another thing that we hear a lot of times from our shoppers, is they feel alone, right?
Yeah.
They feel like it's 9:30 on Sunday night, and they're putting together the grocery list for the week, and I'm just like, oh, this is like, it's an expensive chore, right? Like, nobody wants to do it. Like, nobody enjoys grocery shopping. Nobody's like, oh my gosh, we need to go to the grocery store today, right? Like, there are moments that you might find something new, or you might find a sale, but like, it's not like I can't wait to go grocery shopping. But everybody has to do it, right? Like, everyone buys food. And we just want to give people a little bit of a breath of fresh air, and that they're not alone, that they're not doing it by themselves, that it's not them versus the world, which is what it feels like sometimes. And so we're really grateful that that's the response that we're hearing from our shoppers, and we want to get this word out to as many people as we can, because there's a lot of room for improvement in the way that people currently grocery shop, and we want to be a part of that.
Yeah, and then I think you are solving quite an important problem here, and people live in a hugely expensive city. They can barely afford, and the wages are not getting any better. So I wonder about your infrastructure for the company. So how do you need to really kind of, really own and buy, or is it everything in the cloud and it's very easy to add additional compute?
Yeah. So when we think about kind of the different engines that we've built, there's our pricing engine, there's our inventory engine, there's our equivalency engine. And then there's everything that we do on the front end to make it look like it's magic.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're putting a lot of our effort is like our biggest competition is a piece of paper and a pen, right? It's like if it's not faster than writing it down on, on your notebook or on a whiteboard on the side of your fridge, like we have to be faster, right? And so that's kind of our competition on the experience. And so that informs a lot of what we do on the backside. And the infrastructure that we have. So we've built out, a pretty robust, retailer agnostic master catalog of all the products, right? We have over 600,000 products that we've cataloged already, which is pretty massive. I think it's the largest in the world now. We're at 28,000 stores all across the US already. Each of those stores has their own catalog of products, and like that maps to our catalog of products. And so understanding all those things, and then every single one of those products has a price, right? And so being able to, keep tabs on all of that information, across all of those different stores, and we're growing really quick. Every single month, we're adding more stores, we're adding more products. So it is a big challenge for a very small team. But AI and emerging technologies have just allowed us to really partner with super intelligence, right? To be able to have agents that are doing a lot of this work for us. The repeatable tasks. We're an AI first company. We have AI show and tell on Friday mornings, where everybody has to bring something that they did this week that was new that they tried. We give out awards for the biggest failure, because it's important to fail, right? It's important to try something that you don't know if it's going to work and learn from it, right? And so, we've been, really intentional about the way that we're building the company and the way that we're building the backend so that it looks like magic to our shoppers, and so that it allows us to scale exponentially as we grow. Because as I said, there's 100,000 grocery stores in the country, so we still have a long ways to go.
Definitely. And if you describe the ecosystem of those who are working with you in terms of companies, so partners, vendors, could you briefly talk about this?
Yeah.
And your choices in tech stack, because so many things are really changing. And even if you are discussing agents, I mean, just like an amateur, you say, of course, you always need to check prices at XYZ store. An agent can do it. But is the technology stable? Is it reliable? If you scale now 100-fold, will it still be there without mistakes? So stuff like this, how do you make your choices, who to work with? And who are you working with?
Yeah, so we brought everything in house. So that was a really big decision for us. We started off working with contractors and an incredible agency that like helped us get off the ground, just to test it and prove it. But that allowed us to go raise money from investors. And then so we now have the team internally, and between the back end team, the front end team, and then the design team, we're moving very, very swiftly. With Sigma and their MCP server plugged into anything else that we're building with Quad. It just allows us to prototype really, really fast. Right, try something, test it, see. All right, did that work better? Did this work better? We do a lot of user testing just to before we release things. But now we're releasing a new app almost every week, which is really, really fast.
Yeah.
And our shoppers are giving us feedback, right, in real time. So we're tracking all of that. It goes through our vendor Sentry into our Slack channels, and we're just getting real time information from shoppers, saying, hey, I love this, but here's how you can make it better. And so being able to have all of those things built, to get feedback and to have a source of truth around everything that we do is incredibly important. And so I'm very grateful of the caliber of the people who I've decided to join. Our CTO used to be at Twitter and at WeWork. Our head of product was at Grubhub and Hungry Root. She also did some things for Macy's and was a CPG advisor at Accenture. So a lot of people who have deep experience in the grocery in the retail space that have decided to join the company early. And I think that's just going to make all the difference for the success that we have and the number of people that we're able to serve.
Absolutely. It seems like you have truly experienced team, which is already a huge benefit for the company. Because you use Claude, and Anthropic is very open, which I applaud, about the cybersecurity issues.
Yeah.
And how many cyber criminals just utilize Anthropic technology to penetrate companies, really destroy businesses. Obviously, AI and cyber security goes hand to glove. How do you think about protecting the data, protecting your engine, the assets? How does it slow you down, if at all? So how do you think about the cybersecurity aspect?
Yeah. As we're starting to work with, Fortune 100 retailers, right? And they're trusting us with their data. They're trusting us with their shoppers. It's a huge thing that we've invested a lot into, and not a lot in comparison to everybody in the world, but for a company that's less than 1 year old, we've invested a lot because we are built to scale, and we are moving very fast with these large companies that expect that from us. When we're going through a security audit by, a huge, grocery store, they're looking at our small little team. They're like, all right, what have you done? And so very fortunate that, we've had some incredible partners on the data architecture side of things, the data structure side of things, and the data security side of things. People who actually liked what we were building so much, they invested in the company after they got to know our mission and what we're trying to do. But it is, we kind of have the balance between the cruise ship and the pirate ship.
Yeah.
Right. The pirate ship is move fast, break things, and figure it out. The cruise ship is there's a buffet and dinner served at 7:30. Right. And so, that's a little bit of more of the big business side of things that we have to be aware of. But the pirate ship is how we test everything first. And then we're like, all right, before we put this out to our partners, does it pass the cruise ship, status, and can we put this in front of, C-suite executives at these huge companies? And very fortunate that we've been able to close some deals with some really large partners, and they're like, hey, this works, and as we scale, we built systems that will scale with us.
And because I remember one of the first huge scandals in cybersecurity space in the United States was actually the breach at Target. And I don't remember whether it was 2014 or 2015, but actually this issue came through the ventilation system in one of the store. Yes. So it was not something really in IT, so that they installed some new ERP, whatever. But it was a ventilation system, and it went into the point of sale, and out of sudden, all those credit card numbers were exposed. And as a consequence, the CEO stepped down, the chairman of the board stepped down. And this is how actually this governance issue in cybersecurity started in the United States. So retail obviously is a huge honeypot for cyber criminals, but it's encouraging to see that you're really thinking about the architectural things and getting yourself being audited by large brands. It would be great actually if you publish a paper together or alone on the how, because we all need to learn to protect ourselves. And could you just tell me, what is your vision for the next 12 months? Where do you want to be in 12 months?
Yeah, serving more shoppers across more states and more stores. That's kind of the crux of what we're doing is serve the shopper.
Yeah.
Right. And there's so many things that will come next. But if we continue to get to the point where we just we start to own the brain space of groceries, open strat, right? And people find so much value in our platform and in the app that we're building, first for the shopper, but then for the stores and for the brands. That's really where we're focused. We'll be raising another round of investment capital in the next 12 months. So I'm excited to go back out and chat with more investors about what we're building, because we've made so much progress since the last time we spoke with them. And also the issue is getting even more challenging, right? If you look at what's happening in geopolitical space, the Strait of Hormuz, is not just the fuel, but it's also the fertilizer, right? The crops are already in the ground all across the world, and the fertilizer for those crops has not yet reached, the farmers. And so, unfortunately, that's going to mean higher prices for produce, coming up in the second half of 2026. And so just giving people the source of truth to be able to understand, this is actually how much it costs this week. This is how prices are changing. And here's a little bit of relief for, maybe you can drive a little bit further, save a little bit of money, because that's what you need to do right now. You mentioned kind of, our insights, and what we're able to observe. We interviewed over 1,000 shoppers last year, and 84% of them were worried that they're not going to be able to buy groceries next month the way that they bought them this month. They're thinking about all the strategies that they have to trade down from the stores that they go to or the brands that they buy. 84% of people are changing their grocery habits right now because of the prices already being high since the pandemic. And now all of this is going to happen. I mean, that number's just going to go up, and it's very frustrating for me that not more people are paying attention to this or building solutions for it. But I'm grateful to our team and to the vision that we have. to be in this place right now, and hopefully be able to help millions of shoppers in the coming future.
Yeah, and this is actually how everything has to do with everything and how the world is completely interconnected, right? So a war in the Middle East impacts inflation in the United States and in Europe. The way we buy technology and make decisions on what technology to use is absolutely dependent of geopolitics. So we can sing this song all night long. Andy, just to close this episode, and thank you so much for your insights. I learned so much. How do you learn? And how do you learn about AI?
It's a great question. I was homeschooled by my mom. And so from sixth grade all the way through high school graduation, my mom kind of made my learning my responsibility. She was there to help, she was there to assist, but she would give me my assignments. But it was kind of always, manage your time well, and here's all the work that you need to get done. And so I've always been, as I said, curious and asking one more question, because it was, since a very early age, it's been my job. And my favorite way to learn is to every single person that I meet, I ask, what can they teach me? What do they know more about than I know? Because I think everybody, no matter who they are, it's the very smart, person that you meet on a podcast, your barista at the coffee shop, your Uber driver, the guy who's bagging your groceries at the grocery store, right? They all have a lived experience that's different than yours. And, maybe asking them, one more question to see if they'll engage you in a conversation. They're going to give you an insight that you haven't heard before, or a perspective that you haven't seen. So that's my favorite way to learn. And then I distill a lot of that down. I journal like a crazy person. I write every day in my journal, things that I'm questioning, things that I'm asking. And then I use a lot of what I write in my journal and then test it with Claude and test it in AI to say, like, well, why is this? Like, why does it work that way? Then I'm also involved in quite a few founder groups that have channels just dedicated to AI and how people are building for the inside of their companies, what they've seen work, what they've seen not work, what is a trigger to kind of accelerate you and your company, and then what is just a waste of time. It's a lot of peer-to-peer learning right now. The interesting thing about, like, when social media came out, social media, we all learned in public because there was a feedback loop, right? Likes, comments, more followers. That meant you were doing good at social media. With AI, you're kind of by yourself. You're like, I think this is working. Like, I'm not getting the answer that I thought I was going to get, but like, if you just stick with it. And I think that's the big opportunity, in learning, as you talked about, the difference between literacy and fluency, right?
Yeah.
Is to actually step into testing things, right? Too many people right now are using AI like a search engine to just get a different result, like to get a better explanation for, where's the closest place to get, a chocolate chip cookie in New York City, like, yeah, that's fine. But that's like step 1.1, right? Like, help me build something that can generate, these ideas, and like actually using it as starting off as like a sophisticated intern on routine, and then turning it into a thought partner, turning it into a co-creator, turning it into somebody who can really build a relationship with is where, there's so much opportunity. And I think more and more people, when they understand that, will understand how bright the future can be.
I can't agree more. And I applaud you for journaling and for having genuine human conversations rather than just ask Perplexity Pro or your Claude agent. So, Andy, really, thank you so much. You are a true inspiration. I wished you were around the corner so I can join one of your group. And that was another episode of AI Snacks. I thank all my listeners, and I have something to celebrate because now we are 10,000 people listening to this podcast. And frankly, I don't know anything about advertising, so it was word of mouth. Thank you, everyone. In this podcast, my Romy and Robbie AI book series for families, my social channels are built around my desire to increase understanding and knowledge of AI in the general public and in small businesses. And I'm really fighting for AI literacy and not for superficial AI fluency that might benefit technology companies, but does not serve to increase the level of a good and informed dialogue in the society on what AI should do, where it should be applied. And it's very important for me that we can't AI our way out of every problem. So we are humans and we should stay humans. So check out my AI edutainment website. I publish 2 blogs a week and educate the world about AI and neuroscience. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week. And that concluded another episode of AI Snacks with Romy and Robbie, your place for bite-sized inspiration on how AI is shaping our world and our future. And before you go, here's something exciting. This October, we'll be sharing a special AI literacy project at the House of Lords in London, a milestone moment for our mission to make AI knowledge accessible to everyone. We'll be unveiling new insights, stories, and educational tools to empower leaders, educators, and families to navigate the age of intelligent technologies with confidence and creativity. And I'd love to bring your voice into this journey. If you have questions, reflections, or topics you'd like us to explore, send them our way. Your curiosity shapes our content. You can connect with us on aiedutainment.com or through our LinkedIn community, where we are building an open, curious, and supportive space for AI learners of all backgrounds. And if you haven't yet grabbed your copy of Romy and Robbie and the Secrets of Sleep, our storytelling series that turns AI concepts into relatable adventures, please go on Amazon.com or on the book website www.romyandrobbie. It's a beautiful way to start or deepen your journey into AI literacy, whether for yourself, your team, or your family. And so I will see you next week. Stay curious, stay kind, and keep learning. Together, we are not just talking about AI, we are shaping its story. Thank you.